Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am the host as always. Joining me tonight is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Doing very well. Excited to see a lively chat, obviously, to at least discuss Davante Adams today. What are you guys doing? Daredevil Born Again just dropped at 6 p.m. Go do that. No, I'm kidding. Stay here, drop a question. But after this, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, that is what I will be doing as well. Extremely fired up to talk about Davante Adams to the Chargers, as well as some other potential news regarding the wide receiver market. But yeah, man, I've been waiting a really long time for this Daredevil remake to come out. Haven't been super pleased with like the Disney Marvel stuff as of late. But the early reviews on Daredevil Born Again have been fantastic. The commercials have made it seem like the tone is the same. And so I'm extremely excited for that. Daredevil is probably my favorite MCU project in terms of, TV series. And I can't wait to watch it again. So I'm very curious to see how Disney pushes the mature rating, but by all accounts, they've kept it the same. And they have a lot of correcting to do when it comes to the Kingpin character, because the way that he has been portrayed so far has been horrible. So hopefully they get it right this time around with Daredevil Born Again. And it sounds like it's been pretty good so far.
Yeah, I think so. So curious what you guys end up thinking of that, because we do have a bit of we are kind of a nerdier pod, and we have a bit of a nerdier group of followers and fans. Yeah. So curious. I'm sure that'll be a Saturday question, something we can address. And I'm also very curious, back to football, what Chargers fans think of Davante Adams. It seems like in the chat, it feels a bit more pro Adams. We have more followers at the jump of the show than we usually do. So I feel like it feels pro Adams, but I feel every time we bring up anybody they could sign or even draft, it's not like the right fit, or it's not good enough, or they don't want that player. And so I'm very curious where Chargers fans feel about Davante Adams, and I guess we'll find out pretty soon.
Yeah, let us know in the chat. Let us know in the comments. Let us know on Twitter how you're feeling about it. So we'll start with kind of a broader scope here. The Jets obviously have released Davante Adams, made it official today. Hilarious that they gave up a third-round pick for him at the deadline, basically for like an endorphins boost. Like there was no real like reason for them to go trade for Davante Adams. They were not in the playoff hunt at that time. But they got to see 9 games or whatever it was of Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams together again. So he has been released. Aaron Rodgers has been released as well. There's been a lot of mixed reporting, so we'll start there. Ian Rappaport has been adamant that Davante wants to play out on the West Coast. There's been some linking between Davante and Aaron Rodgers wanting to continue to play again. But the market for Aaron Rodgers is predictably very, very small. It sounds like it's the Giants, and it sounds like it's the Raiders. So would Davante be welcome back in Las Vegas? I don't really know. The Giants don't really have the money for that. They don't have the money for Aaron and Davante. So they're kind of strapped on cash right now, as we saw on last year's Hard Knock show, where they could barely afford to sign the Saquon Barkley replacement. So we'll see what happens there. James Palmer, formerly of NFL Network, currently of Underdog Fantasy, has listed the main potential destinations for Davante Adams as the Chargers, the Broncos, a reunion with the Packers, and the New England Patriots. Those are the 4 teams that he brought up. Yeah. And then again, depending on where Aaron Rodgers signs. So we'll get into what Davante could bring. But that being said, if you kind of go through the lists, I think the Chargers have a great chance to actually get this done with Davante Adams.
I completely agree, especially with the West Coast thing, which other teams just flat out can't say they are a West Coast team. Right. And so finally that pays off for the Chargers. Being a West Coast team, traveling doesn't always pay off, but hey, if he wants to play on the West Coast, you're down to a few options. It's really difficult to find another team that has more boxes checked than the Chargers, other than the one thing, which again, those teams not necessarily, being a contender or not is the only thing the Chargers officially can't say right now. Chargers fans can feel that way after the draft, after free agency. But right now, they're not a contender like other teams in even the AFC or NFC could be. I think they're more of a contender than the Packers. I guess that's our new bit on the show, is just fuck the Packers. I'm so preying on their downfall now.
I know.
Even. but the Chargers have everything else.
Yeah.
Unlike some teams, they have a quarterback that they are going to back and have for a long time. They have a coach that they are going to have for, hopefully, a long time. They have the cap space. And so I think those things, not every team has that. Even if it's the Rams that he's interested in, maybe equally or pretty close to, let's say, the Chargers. Like they almost traded Matthew Stafford like 4 days ago, and they got it done, and he's sticking around. But how much stability is there? If Adams feels like, and so far he doesn't seem like he's slowing down so significantly, if he feels that he has 2, 3, 4 longer years, and he wants to chase, numbers and titles and whatnot, the Chargers offer the most stable spot for him on a side of the country that he wants to be on. Yeah, the cap space for him. And if you're looking to, even if you're just here to find a good spot to go to the next place, working with Justin Herbert sounds okay to me. So we'll talk about, again, what he brings to the Chargers in a bit, but the Chargers just check every box other than surefire contender.
Yeah.
And even with that, the options that are presented, the Chargers are generally better than those teams.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing because usually when a player of this caliber and of this stage of their career does become a free agent, it's like, okay, which contender can sign this player? That's not really being the case. That's not how this is being reported. He's from Palo Alto, and nobody really thinks the 49ers are in play here. They don't really have the money to do a Davante Adams signing, and they're trying potentially to get even rid of Brandon Ayuk. So they're trying to get younger, is all the reporting there. There's talk that the Rams keep Cooper Kupp, and so they're kind of trying to run the thing back with Matthew Stafford. The Broncos was an interesting mention. So the Broncos do have the cap space here. They did make the playoffs. They do have a younger quarterback, but they also have a receiving core that I think is a little redundant with Davante Adams on the field. Obviously, they could move on from Cortland Sutton, but Cortland Sutton, you have Devon Vele, you have what's his name, Franklin from Oregon.
Oh yeah,
Troy Franklin, and then Davante. That's a lot of 6'2", 6'3" X receiver type of players. Obviously, they have Marvin Mims there, so that's a little weird to me. I don't really love the fit if I'm Davante Adams there, and living on the West Coast. I don't know if you really count Denver as the West Coast, but that might be semantics. The Patriots obviously have the money, so if Davante wants money, if that's his highest priority here, then the Patriots are going to outbid everybody. That's already been nationally reported that anybody who is considered a top tier free agent, the Patriots are throwing them a bag. They reportedly called the Eagles about an AJ Brown trade. So congrats on the balls, I guess. Good for you guys for being out there like that. So if Davante wants just another check, then the Chargers are not going to be able to compete with the Patriots. That's just not going to be the case.
Yeah.
But if he will settle for a $24 or $25 million deal, and he wants to play out west and he wants to win, then I think the Chargers have a great chance here, and I think they should be jumping at the chance to do it. Somebody pointed this out earlier. Since he was cut, he would not count against the compensatory pick formula. We know how much that matters to Joe Ortiz. We know how much that is going to impact how they operate. And so I think the Chargers have a really, really good chance to get this done now that he is cut. A trade, definitely not. Did not see that happening. But as a free agent, I think this is definitely a chance that this can happen.
Yeah, Jorge asks, out of 1 to 10, what are the odds this happens for of Adams to the Chargers? To me, it feels like 8.
I was gonna say 7.
My question really is also does Adams want how do you feel Adams wants the Chargers? Is that, it feels enticing to him, right? I don't see any particular reason, unless you really freaking hated that Pop-Tart joke, that you would be against. Why wouldn't the Chargers be one of your destinations?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So I think if you're Davante and you're going through free agency for really the first time ever in your career, because he was obviously drafted in Green Bay and then he was traded to Vegas and then traded to New York. Yeah, Horry says the Hagelin 7 rating is high as fuck. Yeah, me rating it a 7 is high as fuck, yeah, for sure. So if you're Davante, right? So we know he wants to play on the West Coast. That's obviously a check. But I would think also he and Aaron Rodgers have had such a good mind meld that I would think playing with a cerebral, established quarterback would be more of a priority for him than playing with a team for like a young quarterback. And so if you're Davante Adams, and I know we're going to get to the Keenan Allen thing here in a bit probably, but the way that Keenan Allen could potentially talk to Davante about Justin Herbert and his relationship with it, I think would be something that Davante Adams would probably reach out to do. And so I think having that cerebral quarterback makes a lot of sense. I think he's going to want to play for an established head coach. And now, granted, obviously Sean Payton's established, Mike Vrabel is established, but Jim Harbaugh is an easy sell. And the new facility, I think, helps. You and everybody else made the jokes about the NFLPA survey. You could just flash that thing right in Davante Adams' face, say, hey, look what the Chargers have done this last year to do this. So I think the Chargers have a very easy recruiting pitch and a much easier recruiting pitch than basically any other team that Davante is potentially interested in.
Yeah, and I like LD's Bruins point, like that we don't have Davante or what? We don't have Josh McDaniels, which the Patriots do, which could be its own bit of friction.
Supposedly he loved playing for Josh McDaniels. I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. Maybe he liked playing in that specific offense as opposed to like the coach. I don't know, but I did see some New England reporters say that is more of a selling point than kind of the public might think. I don't know. That's
wow. Okay. Really, I definitely would not have guessed. It felt like everything was sour there with McDaniels, but if he likes McDaniels, then I'm out. No, I'm kidding. Yeah. We'll be fine with that.
Yeah. Was going to type this in the chat, but Elliot said that I would rate my wife's cooking a 4 just to keep everybody's on their toes. Joke's on you. I do all the cooking in our house. So I would rate my own
cooking. It's a 3.
And it's a 3. Yeah. Okay. So now that we've kind of covered the chances here, I do want to get into what exactly this brings, because there's a lot of talk about Davante Adams being washed or that he's a diva, whatever. We kind of have addressed the diva conversation, but I made this list a little bit ago. And if you're on our Patreon page or YouTube membership page, I did share this a little bit ago, but I compiled a list of statistics for every receiver that could potentially be available in this specific free agency group, whether that was trade or for free agency as well. I wanted to highlight specifically areas that the Chargers need help in. So I don't obviously have like total yards on here. I don't have receiving touchdowns, everything like that. So I have yards per route run versus man. I have yards per route run versus zone. I have yak per reception, yards after catch per reception. And then I have ESPN's open score. So really trying to figure out which of these receivers can get open versus man, get open versus zone, create that separation, and then create after the catch. Now, if you look at yards per route run versus man versus zone, yak per reception, and ESPN's open score, Davante Adams is in the top 4 in every single category here. Again, this isn't the entire league. This is just players who might be available here. So Davante Adams has the highest yards per route run versus man coverage, which specifically that in particular was a big weakness for the Chargers. And he was at 2.69. He was top 6 in the entire league in yards per route versus man coverage, still at this stage of his career. So you look at the primary areas where the Chargers need help from the wide receiver position. Davante Adams checks every box possible you could look at in regards to how he can impact the game for this team.
And even with the yaks, if you look at like the yards after the catch, that's never really particularly been his thing. You look at his time, and I went back to at least like the Green Bay days. Like, was there a guy who was, maybe a bit more of a yak guy? And yeah, like he was always second or maybe even third on his team on per play stats. The good news is you have Ladd McConkey. In theory, you could make that Quentin Johnston or draft a player. Like it just fits the Chargers perfectly, because what he does against man is exactly what the Chargers need in this offense.
Right.
What he gets zone as well, but in particular, I think against man and how he gets open, Chargers desperately need that. And they saw that with McConkey last year. But even if he's not the same guy after the catch, and he's not a premium yak guy, geez, he's still 4th among potential free agents here anyway, / guys that are moved. You have other ways to make up with that. So he fits perfectly, and he doesn't have to even be that guy after the catch either. It's a perfect fit. One of the best available as is. It's nice to see, there are some who like, okay, like per play stats, who cares? He's not that guy in the total volume. he's there both in the total volume and in the per play stats. Like,
Right.
sure, he's not going to have, I don't think, 1,600 yards this year, 1,700 yards this year, but you feel pretty confident that the floor is higher than anybody else the Chargers could sign in free agency. And that would include, to me, T. Higgins if he were truly available. The floor here with Davante Adams, and maybe even the ceiling, I think is higher.
Yeah, I think Davante versus T. Higgins is a really interesting conversation. Obviously, the Bengals have franchise tagged him, so theoretically, T. Higgins could be available for trade. Whatever. It sounds like he's probably just going to play on this second tag in Cincinnati. So Davante versus T. Higgins is an interesting conversation. But if you look at this top four, the player who's most up here with Davante is actually Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin is third in yards per route runner versus man. He's first versus zone. He's third in yak per reception, and then he is fourth in ESPN's open score. So to me, if you're just talking about like in the short term window, Davante is like it's very clearly the best receiver that the Chargers could potentially get. Now that could obviously drive up his number, right? Like he still could potentially, get a significant kind of contract. But I do think there is going to be something to be said about his age and how that impacts things. But whatever you want to look at in terms of total counting stats, if you want to look at per play stats like I have here, or ESPN's open score, Davante Adams absolutely can get the job done still. The one thing that I would be curious about is that he has kind of played more snaps in the slot recently the last 2 years than he did previously. Now he still is, I think, a true X receiver. And I don't think, Greg Roman's not afraid to move receivers around the formation and execute mismatches that way. But, like I was having a conversation with somebody about, slot percentage for Davante Adams versus like Amari Cooper, whereas Amari Cooper has been historically like an 80% snaps out wide. Like he very rarely travels into the slot. Whereas Davante Adams this past year was about 55-45 split. So he does travel into the slot. But again, I think for the Chargers, that makes a lot of sense. Whereas you can move Ladd, you can move Davante. I know everybody's writing Quentin Johnston off, but you can move Quentin around the formation. You can go draft somebody else that you can move around the formation. Maybe you're not in kind of the X draft territory. Maybe you're kind of pivoting towards like a Jalen Royals kind of conversation. You can move him around the formation. So I think for the Chargers, from a formational standpoint, from an ability standpoint, Davante Adams checks every single box in terms of his ability to come into this team and elevate this offense to a area where we did not see them go last year. And I think we haven't really seen them get to since 2021.
No, definitely not at all. Glimpses of it maybe with the 2.5 Mike Williams games in 2023, but that was basically it. Yeah, this offense would be it's the best. It's so difficult to say, right? But it would be the best 1-2 of Herbert's career, respect to Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. But I think this would be the best 1-2 of their.
I think Ladd right now is better than what we've saw from Mike at his best, and certainly doesn't have the injury questions.
Right. Oh, 100%. So yeah, I'm all for it. At this point with McConkey, everyone's like, yeah, we should get an X receiver. And I get it. I get the sentiment, and they needed it last year, but you don't need a pure boundary guy. I just need anybody who can freaking go win. It didn't matter last year that look at Ladd McConkey could like only play this much inside, this much outside. Like he just flat out went out there and won, and Greg Roman found a way to make that work. And that's the same for Adams, who can be more of an outside guy. Great.
Yeah, I think you don't necessarily need like a pure X. You need somebody who can win vertically like that. For me, that is what the Chargers should be looking for in free agency, is find a reliable veteran receiver who can win vertically. Essentially you're trying to take what you thought you had in TJ Chark and what you had in Joshua Palmer, and you're trying to get an upgrade over one of those two in free agency. And now Joshua Palmer is not a burner, but that was his role. Like he was the speed threat, the vertical threat. He led the team in average depth of target. He led the team in yards per reception. He was their deep threat, and he was like this potentially the slowest one of the starting trio. So you're trying to get a speed threat, or you're trying to get a boundary X receiver. So you have some other options here, but Davante Adams, he can do all of that. And so with Davante, with Ladd, with a draft pick, and Quentin Johnston, I think you feel really, really good about that group. And Davante gives you flexibility where if they sign, let's say Darius Slayton, who there was a connection about them today, if they sign Darius Slayton, you're probably having to take a second round wide receiver bet, maybe even the first round.
Yep.
If you sign Davante, you can wait. You can wait until round 3, round 4, maybe even round 5. Round 5 is probably a little bit of a stretch, but it gives you so much more flexibility in the draft. So again, I think really the only question here for me is, will the Chargers meet his number? Will the Chargers be willing to go out there and spend $25 million cap per year to go get Davante Adams? Because I still think he is that kind of caliber of receiver where he's going to cost a lot. Everything else, I really think that the Chargers have a great shot to land Davante Adams. I think it makes sense for him. I mean, I think it makes sense for them. I think it makes sense for everything else. It's really just like, will they pay up to go get him? And I guess the second one is, what number will he wear? Because he can't wear number 17. That's kind of an aside.
I don't know what he can wear. What did DJ Chark wear? 9?
I think him wearing 7 makes sense because he was 17 and 7 is available.
Yeah.
But so he wore 15 at Fresno State. Can't wear that. He wore number 10 in high school football. He can't wear that.
Wear that one.
He did wear number 4 in high school basketball. I looked this up a little bit ago. This is how into the weeds I am. So he wore number 4 in high school basketball. He can wear number 4.
Okay.
Taylor Heineke was number 4 last year, right?
Sure.
Anyways, so but to me it just makes sense. You know, you cut off the 1 and wear number 7. But,
perfect. Yeah, I'll make it work. Whatever I got to do, I'll stitch it for him or come up with some number. 0 is probably available. No, it's not. That's Henley.
No, there's Henley. Yeah. So it is a little tricky to find him a number. If he wants to go like traditional, he could wear a number in the 80s.
99's available.
99's available. Wait. Oh yeah, because 99 was Matlock and then he changed it.
It's probably not available, but if you're Davante Adams, you can make it available.
1 plus 7 is 8. Yeah, you could wear 8. Oh, Gus is wearing 4. My mistake. Yeah, Heineke was number 8. Yeah. Okay,
perfect.
So
I don't know the Chargers that well. Good job, everybody.
Yeah, as Atticus points out, finally a former Raider. This is our payback.
Yeah. Is, I guess, the drawback, right? Obviously, if you pay Adams, let's just say it's 30 and whatever. That's the number. That's an easy number to work with and using in your brains. Does that deter them from taking at this point or signing a lineman, an offensive lineman? And how much of a drawback is that for you?
Well, I think the guard market is deep enough where they could go down a couple of tiers and still upgrade the market. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe that becomes Patrick McCarry is kind of like your major signing as opposed to like a Will Fries or a Tevin Jenkins. But maybe if that drives them to like Patrick McCarry and Ben Bredesen, I still think that's enough of an upgrade to the offensive line. And then you obviously still have the draft. So I think this is, to me, it's just such a no-brainer that I'm willing to do almost anything else, right? Like Davante Adams to me would be the best possible offensive player you could sign in free agency. T. Higgins is not an option. Trey Smith not an option. So Davante Adams, it's just something that you make a workaround. You know, if that becomes you cutting Joey Bosa instead of working a pay cut, then fine. Like I think that's a sacrifice you have to be willing to make. If that is, you know, you don't really spend on a defensive pass rusher, to go alongside Poona Ford into your tart or whatever, then you make those sacrifices, because I just think Davante changes how you can play offense to such a degree where your offense can go from, middle of the pack, above average offense to this is one of the better offenses in the league. And we've talked about this, right, where we don't really trust Greg Roman to execute an elite offense, at least from a passing standpoint. The best way to do that is you go out and you sign a Davante Adams, and then you have Davante and Ladd, whatever tight end you get, and you just supercharge the skill position to a standpoint where, having a subpar play caller doesn't matter as much.
I completely agree. If you're not taking one at 22, would I trust Minter with defensive tackle or edge rusher at 55, or Greg Roman with their potential receiver at 55? I trust Minter a whole lot more. So yeah, I'm happy to give Roman that help for sure. And that really takes away a lot of the question marks we have about Roman. You don't have to get this guy up to speed. Like you just let Roman have a guy who's incredible. And you don't have to worry about whether Roman can make this work. It's just Davante Adams. Like just throw the fucking football to Davante Adams. I mean, Derek Carr figured it out. Aiden O'Connell figured it out. So I think we can figure it out here.
Yeah, and that's the thing, kind of wrapping up this conversation for Davante is, it was such an issue to get to Ladd at certain times because he was taking so much attention towards the back half of the season. With Davante, you can't double team both. You got to figure out who you want to double team, and then that other person can get open. And obviously, it showed up in the worst ways possible in the biggest games where Ladd gets double teamed and QJ, Will Dissly, Joshua Palmer, whoever, just were not counted upon enough. And so Davante Adams, obviously checks that box and more. So if the Chargers want to get to where they want to get to, I think they would prioritize offensive line, right? But to me, the difference between Will Fries and Patrick McCarry, or Will Fries and Aaron Banks, or whatever, it's really not that big. It really is not that much of a difference. Whereas the difference between Davante Adams and Darius Slayton, who I think is a good player, and I would be in favor of the signing, that's a chasm of a difference, right?
Yeah.
Like you're talking about an offensive changing player versus somebody who can help you. So I just think this is such a no-brainer for the Chargers. I think they absolutely have to make this happen.
Yeah, I agree. And I think even just going through if you do a mock draft or whatever, the Chargers are just in a rough spot. The good news is they made the playoffs. The bad news is you're in kind of a weird spot, unlike last year where you could have had Neighbors, or you got to trade up just a little bit from McConkey. One, you're not picking that early. Two, it's not that kind of class. And we'll get to that, I think, a bit more on Thursday. But Loveland is a top 10 player for a lot of people, big name people, you know? And so everyone's like, yeah, let's go get Loveland, and he might not be there.
Yeah.
Are you taking Golden at 22? Okay, so let's say you don't want to take a receiver at 22 because you're not a huge fan of those guys. Well, Higgins looked freaking great at the combine. Will he be there at 55? I don't know. TBD on how the league feels about Trey Harris, but Daniel Jeremiah seems to like him. Will he be there at 55? I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, with the class of free agent pass catchers being so weak overall this year, especially if Higgins is tagged and he's playing there, I would just rather get this out of the way in free agency. And if you're spending a premium on Davante Adams, but you're doing that to go into the draft and be relaxed because you don't have to force something at 55. I mean, it's not going to happen. We took Derek Harmon at 55 in our mock. Again, that's not happening. But if a player, slips to that spot, a defensive player who's awesome, and you're like, but I didn't solve pass catcher in free agency, so I'm going to take, I don't know. Well, I'll even say it's Higgins, who people are 50-50 on. I wouldn't feel great about that. I mean, you already have Adams. You can take some awesome defensive player in round 2.
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, you could take you could go with Davante Adams. You could go with an offensive lineman in the second round. Get your potential center of the future with Tate Ratledge, who can play that position. Second round's probably a little rich for him. But you could take anybody else, and so it just gives them so much more flexibility. To your point about Colston Loveland, I actually saw 2 mock drafts today that had him going in the top 15. So this is what we've heard about this draft class, and I think it's a little exaggerated, but what we've heard about this draft class is that there's basically 6 or 7 blue chip players. There's only 2 quarterbacks, and one of the quarterbacks is potentially falling in the draft right now because he's got some interviewing concerns. So in that kind of draft, somebody like Colston Loveland is going to go very high because he is potentially the second best pass catcher in this draft. And so, I think teams will care less about the tight end tax and the history of tight ends in this particular draft class because it's just not a super high caliber blue chip kind of draft. So the Chargers might be looking at a world where it's a little tricky to find offensive playmakers in the draft. So if you can sign Davante Adams, that carries so much weight, makes things so much easier for everybody else, that I think it's well worth the conversation here. So last thing about Davante Adams in particular, Cash Cab and some others sent in Cash Cab sent in a super chat. and other people were asking about this. So he says that he needs Adams even more because it keeps him away from the Chiefs. How soon do you think a deal gets done once free agency starts? So since Davante Adams was officially released today, he actually can sign at any point. The tricky thing there is that teams don't really have a ton of cap space until the new league year starts. So that's when the cap officially like becomes real, and that's when the teams can make some moves. So currently, as of today, the Chargers would still be working off of the cap from last season where they had like $7 million or whatever. So could they make it happen? Yes, they still could make it happen. They would have to be very sly, very flexible with cap hits, and they probably would have to pay him a ton of cash up front to lower that cap hit. But it is a little tricky to get done before free agency. Now, again, they could make an official release themselves of like a Joey Bosa, and that would allow them to sign him right away. But I do think this is probably a signing that gets done very early in the free agency cycle. Probably Monday or Tuesday, we hear about where he ends up. I am not concerned about him ending up with the Chiefs. I don't think this is a scenario where he's willing to go that low of a number that somebody like the Chiefs, the Bills, these contenders that don't really have a ton of cash right now. I don't think this is a scenario where he chooses them because it sounds like he still thinks that he can play at a high level and wants to be paid that way, and then maybe get into the ring chasing stage a couple of years from now.
Yeah, if you asked me what his age was, I don't know. I would have said 27, 28, because the numbers suggest he's a guy who's just a very solid, very, very good receiver. So that if you don't know what his age is, you wouldn't be concerned at all based on his production because it's been so consistent. So I agree. If he feels like he can play for more years and doesn't need to go do the ring chasing thing right now, I believe it.
Yeah, I do too. Okay, we got a bunch of questions about this earlier. I apologies for not having the specific names here, but there's been a lot of chatter recently about the Chargers potentially bringing back Keenan Allen and even maybe pairing him with Davante Adams now that he is released. What are your thoughts about the pairing? What are your thoughts about Keenan Allen coming back? We've kind of touched on this a little bit. We both love Keenan Allen. He's behind you. He's one of my favorite Chargers of all time.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts about Keenan coming back and or the pairing of him and Davante Adams?
I don't mind Keenan coming back. I would love for Keenan to come back if he's the clear third option and you are prepared to definitely spend big in the draft, most likely on an outside receiver type. And you are prepared for Ladd McConkey's role to be more heavily on the outside as not an X receiver, but very much so involved in the boundary, because Keenan Allen at this point is unlikely to be doing that. It would be, I don't know where he was with Kellen Moore. I think there was some intention to try to get him more on the outside, but that maybe didn't play out as much as they would have wanted. So of course, Keenan Allen coming back, of course, I'd like to see him back. It's hard to dislike that idea. At the same time, I think, unfortunately or fortunately, they just move on. So would I like him back? Sure. Do I prefer it over him not being back? No. I think they do need to move on. As for the pairing with Adams, no. I don't even think that would be. I mean, it's possible, sure, but you're paying Keenan whatever. You're paying Adams whatever. I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening at all.
Yeah. So to clarify, the chatter that I mentioned earlier was not sources. Who are you asking this question? It was chatter amongst fans. So Keenan Allen, for anybody who missed it, went on Instagram over the weekend and was posting like dozens of clips of him at practice. It was really funny. Like the first few were all of him cooking JC Jackson. So he went out there and was posting a bunch of clips from him in practice. And then he also like found some Davante Adams clips. And then they like tagged each other and they like commented back and forth. So that's where this question is coming from. The two of them together, absolutely not. I still think Keenan at this stage gets a decent enough contract. And Davante Adams, we're talking about potentially like $25 million per year. There's no chance the Chargers are spending that kind of money at receiver. It's just not feasible. You don't have the opportunity to go like if they do that, then you're talking about like Ben Bredesen being their big offensive line addition. And I just like that's not happening. Like they are going to invest along the offensive line. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. I think Keenan Allen can still be a very effective role player. I think the days of him being like a true number one are over, unfortunately. He had a great season in 2023. This past year in Chicago, they actually ramped up his outside snaps at a much higher rate than the Chargers ever did. So he was 45% out wide this year, which is much lower or much higher than it's been in the least recent few years. And he had one of the worst seasons of his career in terms of efficiency per target on the outside. Next Gen Stats had him on like bottom third of the league in that regard. And his lowest yards per route run of his career versus man versus zone, everything. It was not a good season for Keenan, and he got injured again. He dealt with 2 different injuries. So unfortunately, like I love Keenan. He's great. He will always be one of my favorite Chargers, but I don't really think this is a smart football signing. Like, would the vibes be cool? Yeah, of course. But I just don't think it makes a ton of sense for what the Chargers want to do from a football perspective. Mm-hmm. And then there's always that chance, right, that like Justin and Keenan played together for so long. There's a chance that like signing Keenan takes away from some of Ladd's development. Like we've been talking about Ladd as a potential number 1 wide receiver. If you sign Keenan, like I just think there's a little bit of Justin that will prefer to go to Keenan in clutch situations and kind of take that development away from Ladd McConkey. And so to me, it doesn't really make a ton of sense on the field. I love Keenan. I wish him well wherever he goes. But it does not, kind of pass the sniff test for me.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Again, would love to see him in the building, see him with, the coach, and obviously back with Herbert and all that. Clearly the chemistry is there. I think 13 still available. I don't think anyone's playing at number 13.
Yes, still available.
I don't have to change my jersey in the background if he comes back. But yeah, it sucks. You're at the point in the career of a lot of these great Chargers players where it's like, oh, I'd love to see them back. Of course, you'd love to see, if LaDainian Tomlinson was done with the Jets and he wanted to come back. It's like, yeah, like you kind of want to see that for one last go. But, times are a-changing. So I'm not as against it, I think, as some, but I completely understand and would probably be more behind them moving on officially.
Yeah. I just think the Chargers need somebody to take vertical stress away from Ladd, and Keenan obviously is not that guy. So
what about Mike Williams, I guess, since so many people are asking, like, okay, would Mike Williams get more for you than
Mike Williams would make more sense to me, although I would be very like, if I sign Mike Williams, that can't be the only free agent receiver I'm bringing into the table. So Mike Williams has the ability still to win against, contested catch situations. He was still very productive in that regard from a per play basis. And so he still has the ability to go play jump balls. He's probably more of like a wide receiver 4 at this point in time. So if he is your only signing, then that is really poor process in my opinion. But if you sign like a Darius Slayton and a Mike Williams, I'm not opposed to that, because I don't think Mike Williams is going to cost all that much. He's unfortunately did not play super well, and I think it's just that stage of his career. So can he play wide receiver 4? That's kind of a question mark. These players who have been wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2s, you go play wide receiver 4, it makes special teams so much more difficult if your wide receiver 4 can't play special teams. But I'm not opposed to it. I think it would help. But I think receiver construction would just be kind of tricky.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially about special teams. So yeah, I don't know. I think you sign Davante Adams and you figure it out after that.
Yeah. So kind of wrapping this up again, and we'll get to some super chats and questions and call it a day. The Chargers were linked to Darius Slayton, the Giants wide receiver, who I think does make a lot of sense. I think he helps check that box of verticality, has familiarity with the coaching staff. There's been some kind of debates about how much he's going to sign for, or whether he is worth that kind of contract. But you look at, Darnell Mooney and Gabe Davis and, other players of his kind of style, that 13, 14, $15 million range is kind of what you have to pay for a deep threat of this kind of caliber. He is objectively the best deep threat available in free agency. He's still very young. I think he just turned 28. So if you have some kind of concerns about Davante's age, Amari Cooper's age, DeAndre Hopkins' age, whoever that kind of veteran wide receiver prospect versus Darius Slayton, he's 28, still potentially could go to another gear with a better quarterback. And I think this makes some sense. He apparently the other teams that are interested in him are the Steelers and the Panthers. So again, if the Chargers miss out on Davante Adams, that's a very easy sell to Darius Slayton, man. Like, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, Bryce Young. Like, that's a really easy sell for the Chargers. But again, that to me is like, you miss out on Davante. Darius Slayton is a fine pivot after that.
Yeah. Slayton does feel like a nice compromise for what everybody, I think, might want. The way that Harbaugh and the regime might prioritize spending on receiver or investing like early, like first round stuff in receivers. You look at the contracts. Yes, you see like, $13 million. Wow, that's a lot for your wide receiver 2.5 or 3. It's receiver like 25 in terms of APY. I'm starting to look at, especially this year, looking more about like the APY than the big numbers that are just much bigger numbers than when the
guaranteed contracts make it seems crazy, but then like you're saying,
right, exactly. So I think it's a good compromise for everyone to get a clear upgrade, a good option for you, like some of the players that maybe we'll discuss like coming up on Thursday that we might want the Chargers to add. Like, if you can make it work with the Giants and even be half decent over there, I think you can make it work with the Chargers. So you feel good about that. Not a perfect signing. He's not a market resetting type. There isn't one available, so we have to understand who he is. So you go out and get another guy, but it would make sense. It would just be very difficult for me to see that after knowing that Adams is available.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. So, from a numbers perspective, Darius Slayton, obviously, like, he's not a great player. He's had a few seasons where he's gotten, 2023, 770 yards, 2022, 816, his rookie season, 740. But what you're paying for here is the speed, is the size. He doesn't have a great contested catch history, although it was 60% this past season. But you're paying for the verticality here. You're paying for a guy who is a legit 4-4 guy who can stretch the field, who can take stress away from Lineman and Quentin Johnston. You have coaching ties to him with Andy Bischoff. He went to Auburn, so that Joe Ortiz, who also went to Auburn, loves the SEC and loves players from the SEC. I think it does check a lot of boxes. But like you're saying, talking about Davante Adams and then Darius Slayton, it's a big drop-off. But if you're the Chargers, right, like we heard all last offseason where they feel like Justin Herbert can elevate wide receivers, past what they have previously been capable of. That's why they were comfortable signing like a DJ Chark, for example. And obviously that didn't work out. But if you're the Chargers looking at Darius Slayton, who has been kind of a 700-ish yards receiver, and you pair him with Justin Herbert and you pair him in this vertical style offense where Justin Herbert was 3rd in the league in average depth of target this past season, then having a speed threat like him does take some things off of Ladd McConkey's plate, makes things easier. It's just at that point, if he is your receiver signing, you're probably talking about a receiver at 22 or 54 and supplementing it that way, as opposed to Davante gives you a lot more flexibility.
Yeah, this is where and it's now been the case the last couple of years, it's the Quentin Johnston debate at that point. So you have McConkey, obviously, Darius Slayton. Those two are obviously out there the most for you. Then where does the team feel, Johnston is relative to someone at 55? I know how the fan base would feel. The fan base would literally take anybody. Well, Brendan Rice, over Quentin Johnston at this point. But, do they think that Johnston could be a 900-yard receiver this year, which technically, I guess, is possible if he continues his development. He could start pushing that direction. So I don't know. The Quentin Johnston of it all does make the calculations here a bit interesting.
It definitely makes it tricky. It really does. A lot of public chatter around Quentin Johnston from Coach Harbaugh and everybody else that they love Quentin Johnston, right? But I just don't see how you can watch what happened in that playoff game and be like, yeah, man, like we're gonna run it back with him as wide receiver 2. Can he be like a wide receiver 2A and you have a wide receiver 2B in like a Darius Slayton? I think that makes some sense. And then you draft another player in there. And so essentially you would have Ladd as your number 1. And then you would have Slayton, Quentin Johnston, and your rookie to play the rest of the snaps. So we know that they're going to rotate 4 receivers like that. That is their thing. And then the 5th is going to be a special teams player. That's basically how this team is going to view receivers. And so if you can get, competency from wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 4, it goes a really long way in making Quentin Johnston's issues less of a thing. Because if you have Darius Slayton on out wide, Quentin Johnston's not going to draw a Derek Stingley in a game. That's probably going to go to Darius Slayton. So at the very least, it just kind of mixes up coverages a little bit. And then that also allows Quentin to really focus in on like the short routes where he's very, very good. Yeah. I know the fan base is not super high on him, but he was one of the most effective yak receivers in the league last year. And so you give him some slant opportunities, crossers, drags, in breaking routes where he's very good. And you take away those opportunities where he's isolating one-on-one versus man coverage, or he's running a post route, or he's running, a go route against press coverage. That, signing somebody like Darius Slayton takes all of those opportunities away from Quentin and allows him to kind of get into more of a role that I think suits him best. And so wide receiver 2 technically becomes like a bit of a challenge, in this scenario. But I think essentially you're splitting wide receiver 2 between the 2 players.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that they really did find, until the playoff game, which was a rough one for Quentin Johnston.
Sure.
They found a good, they switched from, okay, let's just throw the ball down the field to Quentin Johnston. They went, this isn't working. Like, we got to find some other way to get. And then as soon as they did that, Johnston had such a much better season. Obviously, he finished with the game against the Raiders, where he did get the ball down the field. But he had a much better overall, digs, short crossers, that sort of stuff. That worked for him. So if Slayton allows Quentin to do that, cool. Does it sound like I'm just doing copium right now? Yeah. Ahead of time, I really want them to sign Adams, dude.
Yeah, no, I get it. Darius Slayton is, again, a drastic drop-off from Davante Adams, but it helps. It's a helpful signing.
Totally.
To quote Nate Tice, Darius Slayton is a useful player. And the Chargers do need more useful wide receivers, and that does accomplish that.
No, that's I like that.
Yeah, there was a good comment here from Jacob Arnold as well. Third year for a receiver can be a bigger leap. Adams was mediocre until his 3rd year, but can't bank on it. Yeah, you're definitely not banking on it, but it would track that a very young player who improved into year 2 would improve again. Now, is that going to mean that Quentin is going to be a legitimate, consistent wide receiver 2? I don't know. To me, he's probably going to settle in as like an above average wide receiver 3 being his ceiling, who maybe in a pinch can be a wide receiver 2. And I know that's not great for a first round player, but that's a heck of an improvement from where he was at as a rookie. So we'll see what happens here. I think it stands to reason that he will improve again. But again, like he's saying, you're not banking on it, right? Like, you are going out to improve this position, whether that's in the draft or free agency. I do think the Chargers will make some moves here to make this more of a stable position.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Trying to see if there's any other comments regarding the wide receiver position. We're going to talk about some more specific guys on Thursday. So Thursday, we're going to do our non-negotiable show. It's a free agency show that we love doing every single year. So we'll talk about some more players then. Okay, so before we get to some of these super chats and questions, of course, I have to tell you guys about our friends over at Prize Picks, the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. March Madness is right around the corner. I can't believe that is coming. That is a true statement. Of course, conference tournaments are starting this weekend. I think next weekend. Anyways, I don't know. I don't follow college basketball a ton, but March Madness right around the corner. I will be following March Madness. I will be doing a bracket. And Prize Picks is also going to be a supplemental option for you guys that is going to be super fun to follow during the month of March. They're going to have a lot of specials regarding March Madness and college basketball. NBA season's in full swing, obviously. NHL, everything, Major League Baseball right around the corner. And Prize Picks has you covered with all of it. It's the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. And it does actually help support our show on the Guilty as Charged podcast. So we do really appreciate it. If you guys go to prizepicks.com/guilty, code guilty at checkout, and you get a deposit match up to $50 on your first try. And like I said, it helps support the show. It helps support yourself. prizepicks.com/guilty, code guilty. Okay, let's get into some super chats here before we wrap up. Lorenzo Baltazar says, "What's up, guys? Need Chef Ortiz to move on from Joey and Trey to get this cap room up. And of course, the Slater extension before next week."
Should move on from Joey and Pipkins. Duh. Sorry, I was thinking Trey Smith. Yes. No particular rush. I don't recall when they started doing these moves last year. Who did they cut last year?
Mike Williams.
Oh, yeah. Mike Williams. JC was traded, so not him. Sebastian Joseph Day? Or was he done with his deal?
I think they did cut him, yeah.
So I don't see a particular rush. But yes.
So Mike Williams was cut on March 13th. Free agencies did start later that year.
Mm-hmm. Cut Kendricks, yep.
Cut Kendricks. So the Mike Williams cut happened the Wednesday of the new league year. So they waited quite a bit for Mike Williams. That really did go down to the wire.
Wow, okay.
But again, that was a much more...
Oh, that's right. Sebastian Joseph Day was during the season.
Yeah, that's right. He finished the season on the 49ers.
Thank you, Dylan. I totally forgot about that.
Yeah. So I think Eric Hendricks was cut before, and then they took the receiver/edge debate all the way till the end. And then that's when they cut Mike Williams.
LD Bruin says Popper thinks Pipkins might stick around for depth.
He has mentioned that. Yep. That's an expensive backup.
No.
I just can't justify that contract for a backup player.
Right.
It's just, his cap it next year, I think, is like $9 million. Like that just doesn't make any sense to me.
No. You can sign 4 tarts with that.
Yes. 4 tarts. Okay, Menace with our next one here says, just saw the Falcons are bracing to lose Dahlman. That's Drew Dahlman, if you don't know. Grab him and Adams, he says. Do you think the Chargers would consider wide receiver 2 with the addition of Adams? We kind of touched on that a little bit. I would be shocked if you take a receiver at 22 after drafting Davante Adams. But what are your thoughts about the whole Drew Dahlman thing?
I don't know. I feel like I need to just write it on the board behind me or something. Reasons. Again, if they change everything they're doing, and if Greg Roman decides to, after coordinator job number 32, he would like to change how things are run on offense, then sure, it's not impossible, right? They signed Dahlman. Dahlman is the best center available on the market, without question. And he's much cleaner of an option overall for most teams than a Ryan Kelly, but it's the fit, and I don't see the fit working. And if we'll see what the contract ends up being, because there were some numbers thrown out recently that were like I beg your pardon. So if they want to change what they do, great. If they want to just figure it out because he's a better center than everybody else and this class isn't great, fine, I guess I could see it. But I'm kind of just giving ideas for why it might happen. I don't really believe it's a fit. As far as 22, I doubt there's a receiver at 22 they'd take, maybe even without Adams. But I don't think it changes anything with like Loveland at 22. Loveland, they can absolutely still take at 22.
Yeah, Loveland's still definitely a fit. So PFF has done some updating of their contract projections. They are currently projecting a $14 million per year contract for Drew Dahlman. That would place him as center 2 on the open market. So it's not a crazy number in a vacuum, right? But that would put him ahead of Frank Ragnow, ahead of Eric McCoy, ahead of what Ryan Kelly was making, ahead of Lloyd Cushenberry. That's not a contract I can justify, man. It just is not. I think he's a fine player, but playing him as center 2, like aside from scheme fit, aside from everything else, paying this kind of center 2 money is objectively a horrific move. Like that is not the kind of way that you spend money in free agency, in my opinion. That's a kind of contract that you sign, and then 2 years from now, you're like, well, shit, man. Like, what are we doing with center? Like, we have this expensive center who's not elevating our offense. Let's go draft somebody or let's cut him or whatever. So I cannot justify the amount of money that he is going to require. The other thing that we've said consistently on this show, he is a smaller outside zone player. His gap scheme run percentage the past 4 years of his career was like 22% on average. The Chargers run gap scheme at about 50%. So again, like Tyler is saying here, you have to change your entire game plan if you sign Drew Dahlman. Can a really smart coach like a Ben Johnson do that? Sure. And I think that's probably where he's going to end up signing. But Greg Roman is not that kind of coach. So it doesn't make sense from a financial standpoint. Doesn't make sense from a roster standpoint. I know we all want to upgrade center, and I do too. But a player like Drew Dahlman just does not make any sense for me in any regard.
Yeah. Short answer, as Atticus points out. So no. Yes. The short answer is probably no.
Yes.
As Jacob points out, there just really isn't a clear answer at center right now this year, unfortunately. The answer was last year, but last year is last year.
Yes. If you want to like pay like a premium, Gray Zabel at 22 is your premium bet. And I was listening to Dane Brugler, and he thinks his range starts at 25. So we'll see. That's the offensive lineman from North Dakota State those who don't know. Best center in the draft, I think, bar none. It is a projection because he's never done it. But he is far and away the best center in the draft.
Dang.
Next one here from Ryan Singlin says, "What's up, boys? Thanks for always chatting. If we can only get one high-cost player / signing, at least $15 million in AAV in free agency, who do you want?" Adams? Yes, I think unequivocally that would be Davante Adams for me.
Yes, if I had to pick, definitely Davante Adams. After that, I am warming up to the idea of any of the corners. I think a veteran corner would be really nice for this group.
Yeah. It sounds like Rasul Douglas, your guy, is going to be available. So the Buffalo Bills.
This is going to be my Cordell Patterson.
Yeah.
Of just like wanting him, but never getting him.
That's fair. But the Bills apparently want to get younger in the secondary. So
sure.
Because that fixes their problems.
That worked for you last time you drafted a corner early, I guess. So
yeah.
Get younger at corner. Like you're not good enough at corner to say get younger at corner.
I don't know, man.
I want to get younger. Okay, sure, whatever. All right.
I mean, their safety room was very young, and I love Cole Bishop dearly, but he was exposed in the playoff game, unfortunately. So getting younger in the secondary is fine, but you got to live with the consequences in the playoffs, unfortunately.
Yeah. Or you're the Eagles and somehow Quinton Mitchell
or you just draft insanely good players right away.
Yeah.
Ryan Parsons says, with it seeming more and more likely that we're missing out on Warren / Loveland, any update on Mark Andrews and thoughts on potentially signing?
I don't know any updates in particular on potentially signing 100%. It feels so no-brainer to me to bring in Mark Andrews because I have all my questions about Greg Roman. I don't have questions about Greg Roman and Mark Andrews. Now, will it be the previous like 1,400 yards? I doubt it. But I believe in Greg Roman's ability to figure out Mark Andrews. So absolutely.
Yeah, I was listening to the Athletic Football Show during the combine, and they had beat reporters from like all of their like most interesting teams of the offseason. And they had the Ravens one on, and the Ravens guy made it seem like if you want to convince the Ravens to get rid of him, you have to throw a third round pick in a trade. He thinks that they are going to keep him and then next year hand the keys over to Isaiah Likely, unless you are willing to give the Ravens a top 100 pick, in which case he feels like the Ravens would be able to part ways. So it's just one beat reporter. We'll see what happens here. The Ravens don't have to cut him in order to free up cap space. They can restructure Lamar. They can extend Derrick Henry, which the Eagles did today with Saquon Barkley. So they have some ways where they can create some cap space that are not getting rid of Mark Andrews. But things can always change, man. Like if they're super interested in going out and signing an edge rusher, then you probably got to be a little bit more aggressive and cut Mark Andrews. So things can change quickly in the NFL. But right now, it sounds like he is probably going to stay in Baltimore.
Yeah, huge bummer. Again, everybody's like, oh, I want that player. Oh, he's returning. That seems to be the theme of the offseason so far.
It's the nature of free agency, unfortunately, sometimes. Nicholas Petrilli says that we have to stop finding reasons not to sign certain players and start looking at the upside they bring. Any wide receiver is an upgrade, honestly.
Yeah, we have to discuss all the pros and cons of each of these guys, but ultimately, there are plenty of options that could, at different points, at different levels, provide something to this room that they don't have that they didn't have last year.
Yeah, I agree there. And I think there's a lot of nitpicking that happens. Like I was messaging with somebody about the Chargers potentially signing like a Nick Westbrook-Akine. And it was like, okay, like, at first glance, the person was really into it. But then they're like, well, is that really upgrading your room? And it's like, well, yeah.
Correct.
Because the Chargers had basically 0 receptions from their ex receiver spot, because DJ Chark was supposed to be that guy. And so Nick Westbrook-Akine is not going to move the needle. I'm sure Chargers fans will be upset if he's like the only wide receiver addition. But he does fill a need. He does fill a role that the Chargers need. And it would be a fine signing. Like, am I going to pound the table for him? No, but I think it does make some sense to bring a player like him in. And you're betting on, again, a younger player where all of the other X options, they're all older, man. And so Nick Westbrook-Akine is 27. And I think the Chargers could potentially talk themselves into him if they miss out on some of the other guys.
Yeah, again, levels to this, but last year, Hayden Hurst had 73 receiving yards. DJ Chark had 31 receiving yards. Literally anybody. I mean, Jalen Reagor was an upgrade.
Yeah. Those 2 games, Reagor against the Saints was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, so I know like Mac Hollins isn't going to make the Chargers a contender, but is he an upgrade in the room? Yeah, totally. He would be an upgrade of what they had over DJ Chark.
For sure. Jacob Arnold back here says, thanks as always for the content, guys. With Trey Smith off the market, who is your preferred interior offensive lineman in free agency? And then he says BTFU.
By our rank, or at least my rankings, technically it's Ryan Kelly, but that was kind of a desperation because that's your only option play. To me, like Tevin Jenkins, like come on down. That sounds fun to me.
Yeah, there's a few good options here, but I think in terms of what the Chargers need is flexibility right now, because I think they need to go into the draft solving as much as they can. And so signing somebody like Patrick McCarry just to me checks that box where he can play any of the 5 spots. He's played all 5 spots in the NFL. So he's not the best option. Like I do think, Will Fries, Aaron Banks, Tevin Jenkins, I think they're probably better guards than him. But he's somebody I definitely want on the Chargers because of his versatility. We know that the Chargers are not afraid to move pieces around. So if anything happens to, either of the tackles, Patrick McCarry can slide out there and play tackle. If anything happens to the center, he could go play center. So Patrick McCarry, to me, just as a glue guy, is somebody I'm really, really interested in.
Yeah, don't mind that at all.
Nicholas back with another one. He says Bozeman is a worse idea than paying number 2 center top dollar.
So would rather pay Dahlman than pay Bozeman? I don't know.
In a vacuum, sure. Like, yes,
Yes.
Drew Dalman is better than Bradley Bozeman as a center.
Yes.
Yes, you are correct.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. We're saying all this. We talk about all this. I will believe that Bozeman is not the starter next year when I see it.
Yeah, we always want as fans to go spend and sign the big names, and I get it. Joe Ortiz has said multiple times that they're going to be responsible. They're not going to sign somebody who they don't think can give them return value. And last year was very different, right? Like different kind of circumstances. But they're not going to sign somebody to a top tier market if they feel like that's not going to give them, a return on investment. And yes, Drew Dalman is better, but the return on investment potential for Drew Dalman making $14 million per year versus a guard who you like paying $9 million per year, it's just not the same. And so that is part of free agency. If you look at teams who have done well in free agency, it's kind of the signings who are like the mid-tier signings who then, exceed their value. The Chargers just did this with Puna Ford and Tier Tart. Now look at, Puna Ford's potentially signing for like $8 million per year, according to some people. That's a return on investment, man. Like if you get a comp pick for Puna Ford, that's great. That's the kind of stuff that I think we're talking about with Joe Ortiz. They'll make some signings, obviously, that are aggressive and higher end. But, outside of Davante Adams, I just have a really hard time viewing them spending up at the top of each market.
Yeah, I agree there. I do feel that even though Adams would be a lot, barring a ridiculous contract, it still does feel responsible. Like I would understand for several reasons why like Ortiz would go, okay, like that makes a lot of sense for us right now.
Yeah, I agree. Lots of offensive line talk today. Interesting question from Dylan. He says, is Jamari cooked? Has he reached his peak as a high upside versatile backup? What are your thoughts about Jamari's future?
I think he is always going to be the guy that's kind of just your versatile backup you feel good about. If you can get him to be a Makari-like guy, that'd be awesome. And I truly do wish that we were able to see more of him long-term at guard with this team last year instead of Trey Pipkins, or at minimum a competition, rather than, I don't know, jump in there week 17, figure it out, and then get killed by the Texans in the postseason. I wish we had seen more, but a lot of NFL careers just work out like that, where he just doesn't quite work. Regime change. You kind of want this guy. You're paying that guy. You're the former 6th round pick. I think that he's just going to have that career. And then maybe you see him pick up a stint with another team where he ends up starting, plays pretty well, gets a decent, technically 3rd contract. So, I've always believed in him. I like a lot of what he can do. We just haven't seen a ton of it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And listen, man, you can have a heck of a career as a versatile backup, and he's somebody who can play tackle on a pinch. He can play guard. So if he's the Chargers' main backup, I'm still okay with that, I think. And he can be who were we talking about the other day? I can't remember, but I think the Ravens like backup swing tackle makes like $5 million a year. Like, hey man, like that's a great career. $5 million per year. You get to live in LA and be a backup offensive lineman. Good for you.
Or just put him at center.
Yeah. Last one, I think from Atticus, I think this is interesting. There's been a lot of Michael Mayer trade talks. So according to Vincent Bonsignor and some of the other Raiders beat reporters, the Raiders are shopping Michael Mayer. Now, will the Raiders trade him within division? I don't know. Maybe not. But to me, this is absolutely somebody the Chargers should be calling on if he is available, like the Raiders beat seems to think.
Yeah, fine by me. Former 2nd round pick of the Raiders, right?
Yeah, he was picked like 35. Like he was very high.
Yeah. I'm all for it. The Chargers have traded for a former 2nd round pick, I think. Molden was a 2nd round pick. Molden? Or is that Fulton?
Molden was he a 2nd round pick?
I think I had a 2nd round grade is what I'm thinking of. Which I don't know. Good for me, I guess. But yeah, I'm definitely for them trading for Michael Mayer. It won't happen.
He was the 3rd round pick.
Fine. But I'm happy with Michael Mayer for sure. As Atticus points out, Joe Alt and Mayer reunited. They know Michael Mayer plenty over there. So yeah. I'm all for it. Like Michael Mayer insert like Michigan tight end over the last 10 years, that Michael Mayer fits that pretty well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think he would be a perfect fit. Allows Will Dissly to kind of settle into a screen crosser kind of tight end receiver, and allows, Michael Mayer can stretch the seam. He can split out wide. He's not the best like from the slot tight end, but he checks a lot of other boxes. Contested catch situations would be very, very good. So again, I kind of doubt the Raiders would trade him in division, but if you're the Chargers and you call and the Raiders like, hey, we need, I don't know what kind of value he would have. So he's still on his rookie contract, but I doubt it would be more than like a 4th round pick, as a tight end who hasn't necessarily hit. So you throw the Raiders a 4th round pick. Is that enough? I would think so.
Yeah, probably. Might even be cheaper, but it's tough because he hasn't even had opportunities on the field as much to even be bad. So it's not like he's like, you feel like there's still some value there. I didn't watch him be terrible for 2 years. He just, I don't know, for whatever reason, they forgot about him.
Yeah, Ellie Bruin points out he missed a bunch of games for personal reasons. I don't know if we ever found out what that was. There were rumors that it was like a death in the family or mental health, but I don't think we know enough about that situation to kind of write it off. I could be wrong, but I don't remember there being any like concrete reporting on what exactly was going on there.
Yeah, I don't think I see anything. I'm seeing what you just mentioned. I don't see anything definitive on the news on my one Google search.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't really find anything. Not Michael Myers, Michael Mayer, but
Mike Myers.
Mike Myers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, that Shrek remake, what are we doing?
Yeah, let's just what are we gonna do? All right, let's bring back the characters, but like
really makes them look way worse.
Like all your branding changes, like it won't affect the quality of the movie, but it'll bug me.
Yeah. Watched Shrek with my nieces and nephews over Christmas break. They had never watched it, and that movie, the first one, still holds up so well. So good. A true classic.
Yeah, that was one. Yeah, back in the day, where your parents are taking you to see different kids movies, and it's like, okay, I got to get to see another kids movie. And I remember my dad is having a blast watching the movie because it's got great jokes. It's some plenty of adult jokes in there, so it's great.
It is great. Yeah, I think that's going to do it for us tonight. Tyler and I are going to go watch Daredevil. So really, really excited about that. There's low-key a lot of shows out right now that I need to catch up on. Like I need to catch up on Reacher. Obviously Daredevil is coming out. There's a lot. Severance is out right now. So this is low-key like a really good show time if you're into the streaming services.
Yes. My wife and I just finished season 1 of Shrinking. That's
so good. I love that show.
So good. Yeah.
Love that show.
So apparently season 2 is pretty good too. Yeah, it's perfect. It's kind of got like a New Girl vibe to me with the relationships between everybody and just goofy, different. That show is great. Anyway, of course, this is how we're finishing the show with Shrek and Shrinking and all that sort of stuff.
Harrison Ford, Loki, is hilarious in Shrinking.
He's so funny.
He's so funny. I love Shrinking. That's on Apple TV if anybody wants to go check that out. Jason Segel's great in it. Harrison Ford's great. Love that show.
Yeah, pretty good.
All right, so unless there's some news, we're going to be doing our non-negotiable show on Thursday. It's a great time to re-sign Khalil Mack. I don't know. I'll just throw that out there to finish the show, I guess. But we will be back on Thursday for some kind of show. If there's no news, we'll do our non-negotiable free agent episode, and it'll be a lot of fun. So hopefully you guys will tune in there. We've had a great chat tonight. Appreciate all of you guys for tuning in live. Appreciate you guys who are going to be listening or watching on replay. Make sure to leave us a comment, a rating, review, share with a friend. All that good stuff does continue to help grow the show. We appreciate you so much. This has been another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. Nice face, Tyler. And we will see you next time. As always, Bolts up.